So welcome to the Financial Freedom Podcast. And this is where we're all about empowering you to be in control of your money. Today we have Paul Duynhoven. He is a principal at Auctus Taranaki, an accountant that is focused on agricultural and the rural sector. His family has a background in dairy farming in Taranaki. And in his career, he has been involved in roles where he's managed staff, reviewed work, mentored people, trained staff, and been on a secondment to a multinational company. He's had experience in ranging from work with small businesses and startups to corporates in both the agri and commercial sectors. Outside of work, he's a keen cyclist and races around the North Island and has been involved with the Young Farmers Federation over a number of years and has also done Toastmasters. So welcome, Paul.
Thanks, Kara. Yeah, thank you for having me on today.
You're welcome. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey from the family background in dairy farming to becoming an accountant with a focus on the agriculture and rural sector?
Yeah, so just a progression really. So when I was sort of at high school, discovered accounting and my skills and aptitude, I suppose, for maths and figures and numbers, and just probably a bit of a desire to have some of the money working for me. I was always a fairly good saver. Growing up, so we had the old school bank accounts, and we was putting like 50 cents a week into the deposits into the TSB school banking, sort of took that from there. And whether it was a bit of a natural flair for it or desire to do well in it, then picked up that accounting as a subject at school and did fairly well with it, and then took it further, going through the university ranks. And then came back to New Plymouth to start my career in public practice accounting, and just through the rural background and desire as much as anything to be in a profession where I could continue to follow the sporting pursuits. Accounting sort of lined up pretty well with that. The opportunity presented once I was in the job, in terms of in the role and being involved and getting upskilled and trained, that there was a bit of a gap in terms of the people with expertise and understanding of the rural sector within public practice accounting. So that's certainly opened a few doors for me along the way. Just having an affinity to the rural sector and a real desire to help farmers and see young farmers and other people in agriculture succeed and do well. So just from having a bit of background and understanding of the industry and a bit of a passion for it, that sort of led me down the career track where I am today as a principal in a firm just locally here in Taranaki.
That's interesting because, like you say, Taranaki is a very big agricultural sector, so it's really important that those people that you're working with can actually relate. So that's fantastic. So as an accountant, what specific challenges and opportunities do you see in the agricultural and rural sector when it comes to achieving financial freedom?
So there's a lot, Kara, and at the moment we're in some pretty challenging times. There are a range of factors that can influence people's financial position at any given point in time. But there's certainly some powerful things that people can do and focus on to influence their financial position. So certainly having those goals is pretty important, because if you haven't got those goals, you haven't got that purpose, then it's easy enough to drift along and do the day to day. And where people haven't got a bit of focus on terms of what they're doing, that also makes that progression piece hard. Whereas the people that have set some goals and are working with their advisors and with their mentors, then they're ticking the boxes along the way. And yes, sometimes it may take a little bit longer than initially anticipated. Like probably a lot of people come into the industry with an idea that, hey, from farming, I might be able to buy a farm in 5, 10, 15 years. The reality is that for some people, it may take 20 years. For other people, they may decide that the business that they're running within agriculture will give them some options off farm later on, whether that's via investment in commercial property or the share market or other things, because there are some agricultural businesses that can generate some very good cash flows without that horrendous debt load. I think people are pretty realistic that the amount of equity and capital that takes these days to buy a farm at a reasonable sort of scale is a big hurdle. So putting that amount of capital together to get across the line in terms of buying a farm, although most people, when they start owning their own farm, maybe the dream and goals and aspirations may change along the way. So depending on your family circumstances, depending on what your outlook is, depending on where you want to be and how you want your retirement and the back half of your career to look, could change quite significantly what those outcomes look like. And for some people, 100% owning may not be the best option going forward for them. Being part of an equity partnership of something bigger with some scale may give them more flexibility in terms of having that time off the farm. And if with those scale pieces, sometimes having a 25% chunk of a big equity partnership will be more lucrative than 100% ownership of a 200 cow smaller dairy farm in Taranaki or the Waikato. So horses for courses, but having those goals in line having those goals in mind is pretty important, and also having this strategy in place in terms of ticking the boxes in terms of the lifestyle piece, the retirement piece, and also just that progression in terms of how you want life to be and what you want life to look like. And situations change. It's never. And being able to change along the way, I think, is quite important too. I've done a fair bit of work in and around succession planning and did some research in and around that. And one of the pieces that was really pertinent in that was having the ability to adapt and change, and for the plan to evolve over time. Whereas if it was too rigid, then it was limiting. And it didn't lead ultimately to the best outcomes for the family. So being able to change the plan along the way and understand those reasons why is certainly important too. And because none of us really have an absolute certainty in terms of what the future holds. So even for some people, what they do on their particular farm or block of land, that may evolve over time too. So being able to seize those opportunities and do what's going to be the best for the business and the family and people's personal circumstances is also quite important too. So yeah, having the ability to change in a fluid and changing and sometimes challenging environment is quite important too.
And I really like that you've talked about having a plan, and even though things change, it still gives you that roadmap of where you sort of want to head, but being fluid. I really like that. That's great. So following on from that, what are some common financial mistakes that you've seen farmers or rural business people make, and how do you think they could be avoided?
So there are a number of pitfalls that people can fall into the trap of. And these are generalizations. I really hope that no one feels as though I'm targeting it, and it's not a comment on my client base. It's just a reflection that over a number of years I've worked in a few different firms as I've progressed and had opportunities present themselves. So there's just some generalized sort of comments, but one thing that people can harm their progress is the form of lifestyle that people lead, and that comes back to personal drawings and how much expenditure or how much income is being drawn out of the business. Because ultimately the ability to grow the pot of equity is dependent on how much is left at the end of the year after taxes have been paid and basically people's day-to-day has been maintained. So the person that's able to by and large live within their means and be sensible with their spending, absolutely life's become a whole heap more expensive. But yeah, in real terms, if someone's able, a family's able to survive on, or to take out, 60,000 for a year, then they will be a lot better off than someone that's taking out 100,000. Just that 40,000 differential, when you compound that year on year, after 10 years, a 40,000 differential per year is 400,000. So, if you factor, if it's invested somewhere and you're getting some reasonable returns, effectively that 400 could be closer to 500,000 at the end of that 10 years. And when people are trying to grow, improve their equity position and get to the point where they're either investing in a bigger business or in a farm, then 500,000 is an absolute game changer. If you are needing to put together 3 million as a, for instance sake, and the bank requires 50% equity to get there, willing to loan 1.5. If you've got $1 million, you're doing pretty well, and you've probably been quite successful. But if you've got another 500,000 on top, that from going from $1 million to 1.5, then that gets you across the line. Whereas if you were just rolling along at that same rate, then that could conceivably take you another 5 years to get to that 1.5 point. And depending on the circumstances, then what may have been 3 million 5 years previously, depending on whether land price inflation or other asset appreciation, the hurdle may be a bit higher depending on what the market's done in the 5 years. And unfortunately, there's no certainty with any of this. The 5 years that we're talking about, there might be a bit of a downturn within that 5 years. So at the end of the 5 years, what you thought may have taken you 5 years, you may only be 2 of the 5 years equivalent on the way through. Like people that have been in industry for a while, particularly dairy industry, and seen some of the ups and the downs. When we had the couple of very poor payout years, 2014, 2015, for some people that was took them 2 to 3 years to recover in terms of the balance sheets, just from those 2 really poor seasons. So depending on the time frames and a bit of luck and opportunity, sometimes just being the victim of circumstances that can certainly delay being able to make those investment decisions. But if you've got a focus on in and around ensuring that you're taking every dollar as a prisoner, and being able to reinvest back into the business, then that will put you in the best position to be able to move forward. Some other common ones that we see that can hold people back is having keeping up with the Jones mentality, or needing to have the latest and greatest when it comes to machinery, plant and equipment, personal vehicles or vehicles within the business. So the cost of running a new Ford Ranger or a Falcon, a 5-year-old or a new, returning over your tractor to a new John Deere every 5 years, and potentially running a top of the line Honda side by side, may be restrictive in terms of how fast you can grow that capital piece. Obviously, circumstances, some businesses absolutely will need those higher spec assets and will absolutely be able to justify them, but others, by and large, may be able to get by with some other options. And it may be that making a choice that, hey, you've got the one really good work vehicle, and you're willing to buy new and get the 10 plus years out of it. And over the long run, that's a good investment decision. But the second vehicle is a runabout, a cheaper or more efficient option in terms of ensuring that you're getting the bang for buck out of it. Other pieces sometimes potentially we can see with farm owners is overcapitalizing. So that's when ultimately the assets that have been purchased in the business or they're spending on the land outweigh the returns that you're able to generate. So, for instance, it's far-fetched type example, but for a 200 cow farm, you're not going to put in a 50 bale rotary and spend 1.5 or $1 million on a new cow shed in that type scenario, because you just, although it might be super quick to milk your 200 cows, your 250 and your 300 cows, the return on that investment, you're just not going to justify it over the long run. So it's having the appropriate infrastructure for your systems in terms of being the most efficient. And as accountants, we're not here to advise people in terms of what system of running their farm is going to be the best for them, because there are very good operators that thrive in a low-cost environment and with a low-cost production system. There are other operators that thrive under a high input model. There's no right or wrongs there. Sometimes those things can be tailored to the type of land that they've got, the layout of the farm, other structures, expertise. Sometimes it can be dependent on the scale, where you've got staff and the ability to run a more high input model for some people, and then that makes a difference. Whereas someone that's effectively a sole trader sort of operator, a one-man band, then for them, milking once a day and being super efficient with what they do, maybe the best option that's going to generate the most profit, rather than needing to take on an employee in terms of being able to milk twice a day. So being able to take a step back and be pragmatic about type of farming system and what you need as far as infrastructure goes, for some people will have a big bearing ultimately in where they end up. And another pitfall or a thing to be aware of that I have seen previously is people that get too distracted from the core business. So those distractions could be trying to put in place complementary businesses, such as trying to run some contracting or on the side, or have a batch, or have some rental properties or other things off farm. Diversification ultimately overall is a really good strategy, but it's a good strategy provided that the main key thing that you're doing is running really well and generating positive cash flows, and that anything that you're trying to do outside of that is not hindering that main economic activity that you're doing. Fantastic if you've got a passion project, but if your passion project is draining all of the finances from your main entity, then long game it's just going to be a case of a race to the bottom, because a supporting business can only support a profitable, thriving business can only support a failing one for so long before it starts to be dragged down. And there are circumstances, there's options and combinations. If you had a dairy farm in the Bay of Plenty and it was suitable for horticultural enterprises, then by all means, going into a JV, a joint venture with someone else to potentially do some horticulture, or looking into those avenues could be a very profitable way of boosting the overall farm income. But it's being able to critically evaluate what those options and opportunities are, and to not get overly caught up with the sunk costs of what's being gone before. Rule of thumb sometimes with going down those alternate business opportunities or options is to be only dipping your toe, and you're looking at 5%, 10% sort of max of your turnover. So if it doesn't work out, then you can afford to write it off and move on. Because generally, unless it's a complete bust, most times that you'll be able to sell off whatever the thing is, whether it's a piece of machinery or a block of land or whatever the scenario is. You can generally will be able to recover something, so it won't be a complete loss. Whereas pouring good money after bad, strategically, ultimately it doesn't help the bottom line, and where you've got the ambition to have a multi-generational business, can certainly put the brakes on that.
Mm-hmm. And I think it all comes back to having a plan, doesn't it? And sticking to that plan. So obviously you've got a diverse experience within the industry. Can you share a specific story or case study where you were able to actually help a business perhaps turn around their situation and achieve financial freedom?
Correct the memory banks in terms of that one. This one's sort of it's a related sort of one rather than the one that I was specifically involved in the driving of. But this one was one where people, the farmer effectively looked at their system in terms of what they were doing, and I had a little bit of involvement with it, but I wasn't right at the absolute coalface. But the scenario was that the cows had a long way, the layout of the farm, the cows had a long way of walking, and ultimately it wasn't efficient to continue to be running the farm, milking twice a day. So what the farmer did was they ended up splitting the herd, and that they were milking half the herd twice a day. So although they were still milking twice a day, they were taking out a lot of the walking that was required for their cows, because the cows were actually using a lot of energy getting to and from the cow shed. So basically it was reduce the labour input required, reduce the amount of feed, ultimately the energy expended required from the cows. Although there was a drop in production, the overall piece made it a more economic scenario in terms of what they were doing in the overall piece. I'm just thinking of other ones that I have been involved with.
So in that one though, that would have really helped the overall well-being of the cattle as well, of the cows.
I think they potentially had a few less incidents of lameness, just with the less distance required to be walked on farm. But generally cows, it's a bit like us as humans, and energy input, energy output. If you're overindulging on too regular a basis, then ultimately you'll put on a bit of condition. Whereas cows, that they're using the energy that they consume on a day-to-day throughout the majority of the season to making milk. So if you're taking out that excess of walking, then they've got more energy available to be putting into milk. So it's and dairy farming, sometimes you hear the expression that they're milking off their back. So the cow's still producing milk and producing really well, but it's not sustainable because they're using that condition when they're going from peak. And it's a bit like us. If you might be able to get away with a couple of days with really poor sleep and really poor nutrition, but it's not sustainable over a whole week. So, from a cow's perspective, it's not sustainable over the whole season to be running on empty. So whatever condition they might have start with, then if they've milked that off, then it's going to be a lot harder for them to produce at a good rate throughout the rest of the season. So there's a number of factors in play there for that particular farmer. Other ones is a case of being able to move early and working with the banks in and around when situations are changing, and being able to make some calls early when opportunities present. And one that we dealt with, that's sort of made a bit of a difference to them is 18 odd months ago, they were looking at their mortgage rates. Previously they'd had their mortgages all on floating rates, and we did some analysis and looked at what the projected rates were to be. And we're not financial advisors, so we can't tell people what they should do in relation to their mortgages. But we just sort of drew up some tables in terms of some risk factors, and worked with their bankers as well. And these people decided to fix some of their interest rates at that time, and just based on that, then when interest rates have subsequently risen, then they haven't borne the brunt of that, and they've still been in a really good position. So when an opportunity has came up to buy some additional land to add to their dairying operation, then they've been able to jump at that chance and do that, because they've lined themselves up to be in a really good financial position. So although the interest rate piece wasn't the absolute, because they've done a lot of other things really well, and had paid down some debt to put themselves in that position, they wouldn't have been able to pay off anywhere near as much debt in the last 18 months if they were still running on floating rates, because that would have bitten potentially to the extent of $1.50, maybe up to $2 a kilo of milk solids in that time. And that starts to add up if you're doing, even if you're just doing 50,000 kilos, $2 a kilo of milk solids, that's 100,000. And that's for some people that could be a season, 2 seasons worth of profit. But, as definitely depending on your scale, all of these things can be magnified. We've certainly seen or heard of instances where just that flick in interest rates, even with a relatively stable payout environment, it's been a $1 million swing, 500,000 profitability one year, looking at an economic loss of 500,000 the following year. So scale can present its own set of challenges too, but in that particular circumstance, we were able to assist someone, and because they were in a good position, then they were able to take an opportunity to grow their business. That just even that sale piece, that can sort of tie into that overcapitalization argument as well. So, the temptation is when the neighbouring farm comes up or a neighbouring block of land comes up, that because it's that one-time opportunity to buy it, then sometimes people get that emotional attachment and are willing to pay whatever it takes. Whereas only being willing to stick to what your limit is on that, and what stacks up is a better strategy, because ultimately, if you're looking at it the other way, will I be willing to put everything that I've got at risk to get this one deal across the line? So most times will be no. So it's having that in the back of your mind versus overpaying, paying for something. And a lot of people often think it will only be the one opportunity to buy. If you overpay, then you may only have one opportunity to sell, because that's potentially where you can end up. You know, if someone else wants to pay overs, then let them, because ultimately they've got to make that work. If they can't make it work, then it may circle back in five years' time and you get that opportunity again. It's very rare that things are an absolute certainty. So not overpaying for the neighbours. Certainly that can help the course in the long game too.
No, you're quite right. I always say to people that opportunities always present themselves. They might change, but there are always opportunities. So just conscious of time there, Paul. So from a financial perspective, what's something that you would tell your younger self? So if you were talking to your younger self today, what's something that you would recommend from a financial perspective?
I would have probably recommended that I diversified earlier. So when I was I've effectively been a townie for the best part. These days, eventually I'd like to own some land and be a bit more involved directly with agriculture. But at this stage, I'm in town and a house over in town. So my recommendation would have been to start diversifying earlier, to take advantage of some of the financial markets, because over time, even in your index type funds, there's certainly some opportunities out there. Potentially could have leveraged off some of those earlier. And the strategy I followed, I paid down debt, which is you can't really go too far wrong with paying down debt. But with a bit of balance, it wouldn't have been the worst thing over time to have had a bit more diversification and a bit more exposure to financial markets. I probably wouldn't go down the track of share trading. That's sort of not my expertise, not my game. But leaving a bit of funds to the professionals, even if I just started, when I started working, and just put $100 a week or something along those lines into a portfolio type investment or an index fund. I think over time I would have done fairly well, just in terms of how financial markets over time tend to go. So that's probably the one piece of advice I would have given my younger self. Obviously, financial markets and financial investments aren't for everyone, but for me, it sort of goes back to that risk piece. Like, I wouldn't have been risking anything that I couldn't have afforded to have got by without otherwise. But I think the returns on the other side would have been beneficial overall. So having a bit of diversification in your personal finances can be advantageous. And that's something else for clients to be aware of. The younger guys, there are many ways of growing your equity. It doesn't just have to be money sitting in the bank.
No, that's a good point. So is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with today?
I think attitude, your attitude towards life and where you're going and what you want to do and what you want to achieve. I think having a positive attitude and outlook, and where possible, surrounding yourself with the sort of people that you want to be. If you're able to do that, you're a lot likely to get a lot further. Whereas if you're constantly listening to the negative and the doomsayers, then ultimately that's the sort of attitude that you'll pick up. Plenty of opportunities to ask questions of good people, and generally good people want to help others get ahead. Industry, it's not not a dog eat dog world. In some instances, some industries, it probably is, but I think by and large, people in ag want to see others succeed and do well. So, hang out with those sort of people and look after yourself along the way too. You're not going to be long game. You're just not going to be around to see out your goals and ambitions if you're not looking after your general health and well-being. So, it's important to have some good goals and work hard towards them. If your own health starts to suffer, you're just not going to make it because you made it too hard. So, it's taking a bit of balance to all these things. So, absolutely, it'd be nice to, to be owning a 500 cow farm by the time you're 40. But if you have a heart attack at 45, and end up in a box, then you're not there for your family for the rest of what can conceivably don't know what life expectancy is these days. I think most people will be probably hoping they get to north of 80. So a lot of life to be lived. So taking a bit of that long game at times can be quite a useful attitude to have, and try and look after the people that you got around you. People want to be working with good people, and if you can create the right environment and surround yourself with the right sort of people, then hopefully then that's going to lead to a lot more wins and a lot better outcomes than that are fulfilling in life, both personally and professionally.
Oh, that's awesome, Paul. Hey, thank you so much for your time today. We'll put in the show notes where people can get in touch with you if they obviously want to seek advice and bits and pieces with their accounting. So thank you very much.
No, it's fantastic. Thank you, Kara.